Pourquoi on veut la bouger? Elle n'est pas ministre. Oui, mais d'accord, mais s'il est chef de cabinet, il peut très bien être ici.
Oui, oui,
non?
c'est bien. La traduction espagnole, ça va être vraiment... Attends, tu en as encore?
C'est ça, on commence, non? Non, non, moi je co-facilite. Allô? Il descend. Non, non, il a mis ses propres écouteurs sur le machin. Ouais, ouais. Il a mis ses propres écouteurs sur le truc. Ouais, Ingo et Yob, c'est ça. Envoie-moi le.
Tu veux la même chose que moi?
Ouais. Je vais essayer de faire comme ça sur téléphone. On va voir si ça marche ou pas.
Pourquoi ça ne marcherait pas? Excellencies, directors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, good afternoon. I can say good afternoon because now it's just a bit above noon. I'm very honored to be here. I'm very honored to see most of you after, just 2 months or 1 month and a half, after Brazzaville. And as you know, today is a very special day because it's going to be the first real day to follow up what happened in Brazzaville. So the reason we are here is because Mrs. Soudan Nuno, Minister of Environment, of Climate Change, of Congo Basin, she's the technical coordinator of the Congo Basin Climate Commission, wanted to bring you all together at the COP to organize the next step, of the Summit of the Three Basins. This is the reason why she wanted to have you here as special guests of this event. So I will not be long. With my colleague Suzanne, we will moderate this panel, but without waiting, I would say, I will ask the Minister, Soudan Nuno, to make the opening address of this meeting. Thank you, Minister.
Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres,
My ministers, dear colleagues, thank you for being here. Ambassadors, representatives of the various states, the representatives of the executive agencies, of the UN system and all international organizations, ladies and gentlemen, representatives of the technical partners, representatives of youth, of civil society, of indigenous peoples, representatives of the private sector and the financial and economic sectors, my distinguished guests. 6 weeks ago, day for day, we finished on a standing ovation the summit of the three basins. So Amazon, Borneo, Mekong, Southeast Asia and Africa, which was initiated by Denis Sassou Nguesso, the president of the Republic of Congo and the president of the Congo Basin, and who was also present with the president of the Amazon and of Borneo Mekong. And we also had a major technical partner, the Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, who worked with us with the various states. And we had other representatives of international organizations like the UCN and our own structures, our own internal structures like LUTCA, l'Océan, who were involved, CARICOM, the COMIFAC, a whole list, all of the French-speaking agencies, all the partners were there because the questions of climate, biodiversity and environment are now global issues. Though 6 weeks ago, coming from 130 countries representing the 7 continents, declared their willingness to create this historical moment. Brazzaville had 7,500 accreditations, 6,900 on site, and over 600 participants taking part from all over the world who came to Brazzaville to take part in this major three-basin summit. This historic moment allowed us to set up a framework, a cooperation framework that we want it to be a south-south. The three basins represent 83% of forest ecosystems in the planet, and all three are situated in the south, in the global south, a quarter of biodiversity. I'm not saying that we do not work with Northern Hemisphere countries, but we in the South need to know each other better, work together so that we can have this strong voice that will attract funding. So perhaps I forgot to mention some iconic partners. I would like to do it now. We had the Kingdom of Morocco. The Majesty sent a special envoy, the Minister of the Environment, because we work very closely with the 4 Cs of Maroc and with the Social and Economic Conseil of Africa. So when you have historic partners who really are faithful partners, it would be a failing to forget them. Perhaps they are too close to us, but it would be a crime to forget them. At the start of my speech, I started, and I perhaps forgot to talk about the president of the ADB, and now Brazzaville is one of the stages of the reconciliation between the rights of climate and biodiversity, because we don't understand why we have climate COPs and every 2 years have a biodiversity COP. So it was really important for us to have in Brazzaville the boss of the CDB, who is here with us today. As I was saying, 6 weeks ago, our political leaders came to a consensus. This was a balanced consensus. They endorsed the agreement of the Brazzaville summit with a decision to start a coordination process, coordination between the 3 basins, and to set up a global coordination. In this declaration, they committed to 7 factors that I would like to list here, recognizing the utility of strong cooperation between the 3 basins, recognizing this stronger coordination. The sovereignty of biodiversity, it depends on this, of our forests. And we'd like to involve the countries that compose our 3 basins without wishing to prevent any external participation, so that we may come to a common agreement within the regional and within the 3 basins. We'd also like to develop ad hoc solutions on the institutional level, on the diplomatic and legal, scientific, technical and technological levels, adapted to the specific challenges of each state, because we respect the sovereignty of each state and of each basin. So at Brazzaville, we agreed to pool together and build on knowledge, experience, resources, and individual experience. This was brought together in an inclusive logic. All the states, including the indigenous populations, young people, women, civil society, NGOs, universities and research institutions, local authorities, and the private sector. We also need to encourage financial commitment and the development of traditional financial and also innovative financial mechanisms. We also need to set up a durable funding system. The planet depends on this. I remind you that we are representing 80% of the world's forestry biodiversity, and this is between 15 to 30% that we represent. So that's 15 years of greenhouse gas emissions. This is stated in the global stocktake. So we need to really put our weight in the balance of discussions. We will conclude by recognizing that these various factors, these 7 factors, create the foundations of a roadmap for the construction of a framework a common framework for our coordination between the three basins. We're here 6 weeks later at Dubai in the temple of international discussions to fight global change on Nature Day to put into practice the will of the heads of state and to implement the construction of the common cooperation framework between the three basins called the Coalition of the Three Basins. As the technical coordinating minister of the climate coordination of the Congo Basin, and after having headed the Three Basins Summit on behalf of the host country, the Congo, I wanted to acknowledge the presence of all the stakeholders here at Dubai in this side event, which is called Results and Perspectives of the Three Basins Summit. There are three goals and I would like to share these, hoping that you also sign up to them. Presenting and giving a perspective to the results, the outcomes and conclusions of the Three Basins Summit. As I recalled earlier, mobilizing all the stakeholders who were absent at Brazzaville, encourage them to join the momentum in the technical meetings, and also outline the operational framework, the coordination and assessment of the cooperation between the three basins. In this perspective, our joint event will comprise three aspects: the presentation of the outcomes and the results of the work of the summit by the people who were the rapporteurs of the work culminating from the 26 side events at the event. And I'd really like to highlight the remarkable work for which I would like to state my thanks. I would like to remind you of the EY who provided the technical coordination, and we had a technical participation of the UN for this, so the UN EP as well, UNEP, who and this was also, we also benefited from the cooperation of the Secretary General of the UNET in this particular. We also had a discussion between political leaders, representatives of the three basins, to elaborate this work and coordination framework. Also working with various donors and financial institutions in view of financing. Next year, in September, next year, September, October, we will be organizing a major donor summit. We have a budget of $10 billion, all produced by our DCNs, and we hope to duplicate this experience in the Amazon basin. We also want to duplicate this approach in the South Asia, Borneo, Mekong basins. And for those who attended Brazzaville, I think you will agree that this session that we have postponed to strengthen the maturity of the projects and increase the possibility of financing to September. We have a major donor who is acting as the leader, which is the UICN, whose coordinator is from Africa. She is here today. And we also obviously had the World Bank as a stakeholder and the UNPD. We also have the participation of Central African states and others who will join forces with us, with the UICN, to take part in this donors roundtable. I would also like to remind you that here at Dubai, our 3 goals are therefore what I've already shared with you. And I will now thank you. And without further ado, I will hand over to the moderator, who will continue our discussions. But at this stage, I really wanted to thank you for your attention, for the energy, creativity, commitment of the future contributions that the various parties will give, given that they will really make an imprint on the future of our ecosystems and on the life of our planet. Thank you very much. The moderator speaking in English.
Okay.
Madame la Ministre, merci beaucoup pour ces mots.
Mrs. Minister, thank you very much for those words who gave us a little background and what we've succeeded in achieving together in Brazza. Without further ado, I'll ask Mr. David Cooper, Executive Director of CBLE, to join us. Mr. Cooper, please.
Thank you very much, Suzanne, and I'd like to give my appreciation, my congratulations to the Minister, Her Excellency Arlette Soudan Nono, for successfully bringing people together in Brazzaville and now bringing us again here in Dubai. The relevance of the 3 basins it's really central to the agenda here at the Climate Convention and here on Nature Day. The Congo Basin and the Amazon Basin, the tropical forests of Southeast Asia, together are obviously essential for the protection of biological diversity. They're essential to protect in the fight against climate change. But of course, beyond that, they're essential for the people who live in these 3 forest basins. They're essential for the stability of life on this planet. And this was really the topic of panel number 5, which was looking at the science behind the discussions in the 3 Basins Summit, looking at the interactions between biodiversity and climate change. And the first point is this, really, that these 3 basins are essential not only for sequestering carbon and therefore for being part of the fight against climate change, they're essential for adapting to climate change, they're essential for providing the moisture that provides rainfall in other parts of the continent. For example, the Amazon that supports these flying rivers that provide rainfall throughout South America and support agriculture. Similarly, the Congo Basin supporting rain-fed agriculture throughout Africa. We have to address these issues of the conservation of biological diversity and the fight against climate change together as one issue. We have the opportunity at this Conference of the Parties, as we look at the stocktake, which clearly shows that not enough is being done to mitigate climate change, to make sure that as we go forward, we integrate the work on enhancing the NDCs, that is clearly so necessary, with the work necessary to implement the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework that was adopted just short of a year ago in Montreal. We have the opportunity to bring these two processes together at the national level. We will see this afternoon the two presidencies of the climate process, China, the climate process, the UAE, the biodiversity process, China, coming together to launch a joint statement on this issue this afternoon. But of course, we have these two frameworks, the Paris Agreement, the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Implementing those agreements is essential for maintaining a livable planet for us all. We have to now move from those agreements to action urgently. And clearly, the efforts of the three basins are going to be central to that challenge. So once again, Honourable Minister, let me just appreciate your leadership, your amazing achievement, I think, in bringing together the three basins, in bringing together the international agencies to support these efforts. I'm sure you're going to take further steps in this discussion and in the future to translate now that ambition that countries have demonstrated into action on the ground. Thank you.
Monsieur le secrétaire exécutif, dear David.
Mr. Executive Secretary, Mr. David Cooper, thank you for your
commitment, but we wanted to thank you warmly for your presence and for your contribution because, as you said, the convergence between climate and biodiversity is just strategic. It's key for everyone, especially for operators on the ground. And thank you so much for your help and your energy to support, this initiative. Thank you so much. We can have big hands. Mesdames, Messieurs, on a commencé.
Ladies and gentlemen, we started with this, with the rapporteur of this panel because Mr. Cooper had a previous engagement and had to leave us. Now I'm going to speak to Commissioner Tabuna. No need for introducing him, but as a matter of he is a commissioner of the Central African states, is one of the pillars of this whole action, including the Brazza summit through his personal commitment, his intelligence, and his mobilization. He was the rapporteur in Brazzaville of a panel on a very key challenge, which was governance, which means how to implement coordination and the governance of the countries of the three basins. And dear Honoré, you have the high responsibility to tell us a little bit what happened there in Brazza on this topic.
Merci beaucoup, Patrice.
Thank you very much, Patrice. Mrs. Arlette Soudan-Nouo, Minister of the Environment and of the Sustainable Development and Technical Coordinator of the Climate Commission of the Congo Basin and of the Blue Fund for the Congo Basin. I am Honoré Tabuna, which I've just introduced. I'm the head of the Department Environment, Natural Resources, Agriculture, and Rural Development of the in the CCEAC community, the one of the 8 regional economic communities with the Eastern Africa Economic Community represents the Congo Basin, which gathers 16 countries, which we need to add the 9 countries from the Amazon region and the 5 countries from the Borneo Mekong and the 6th country from the ASEAN. So it amounts to 31 countries which together form the 3 forest basins with biodiversity. Then, how to have those 31 countries collaborate. Hence, one of the goals of the three basin summit has been quoted earlier. It went around governance. What kind of governance? So I had the luck and this honor to moderate that panel in Brazzaville, which was presided over by Mrs. Minister Arlette Soudan-Nouo. And the panelists were the following. Mr. Minister of the Congo Republic in charge of land issues, the WHO representative in Congo, the regional director of UNICEF, the representative UNDP, representative of indigenous people of Southeast Asia, and the representative from Brazil. So you can see all three basins were there, and as Mrs. Minister told, not only those coming from the three basins, but we had representatives of the UN system. We started speaking about governments, as Mrs. Minister said. We ended up speaking about cooperation. You can read on the screen that the key elements were to implement a progressive cooperation between those three basins. And this cooperation needed to be inclusive from the start, integrating all state parties and stakeholders, indigenous communities, the women, the youth, local-led, nationally-led, and international and inter-basin cooperation. On the scientific side, it should also be transparent. So at the end, we needed a binding text, but in the context of multilateral agreements on the environment. We took into account the aspect of human health, ecosystems, and the animals. We are speaking progressively of One Health on this. So progressively building this governance, we need to think of hosting a summit of the heads of state, and the heads of the national states will have to have a link with the goals of the SDGs. So how to integrate all elements in the final declaration of this Brazzaville summit? The one that's been read out in Brazza, they contained 7 points, and if I can delve into details. And a result of this panel have come into this the final text, final draft of this declaration. So economically wise, financially wise, and diplomatically and socially wise, and not to forget when you speak of the social and cultural side, there was a panel on indigenous people, the role that those peoples have played in the valuation and appreciation of those medicinal plants. So about carbon finance, we're speaking a lot more. We have the guardians of those forests. We saw the champions of those palm oil. And now that we have is our environmental services for the capture and the rejection of oxygen. We're speaking of the carbon market finance. So innovative financial tools in order to fund not only the management of those forests, but also the development of those 31 countries that I've just quoted. State sovereignty needs to be taken into account. It's a responsibility of the Republic of Congo since 2011, because what happened in Brazil, it was a second summit. So little by little, we are building a diplomatic framework for the tropical forest management in the world. Finally, the implementation of binding texts, which are going to come into force little by little. Then the diplomacy at the scale of the three basins. We recalled you how many participants there were at that summit. So for those who participated in 2011, and when you compare 2011 with 2023, and the way we advanced, we all think that we're going to make this effort to promote this platform through diplomacy, this platform of the tropical forest, so that it can be streamlined in the world diplomacy. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Commissaire. On this next panel, I will invite to join us the International Tropical Timber Organization, Mrs. Shem Sadhguru. She facilitated a panel that really looked at the strategy of integrations of across the three basins, and that looked at two key elements. One, how do we do it? And two, how do we make sure that we convene people together in order to establish sustainable strategies? Madam.
Madame la Minister, Ms. Arlette Sonono, heartiest congratulations to you, Madame, as the co-coordinator for the Three Basins Congo Summit, and your achievements and also the future path of the Three Basins Summit is relatively clearly set from the partners who are already here, not just at the Climate Change Summit, but also those who work on biodiversity matters and on international cooperation. To the rest of the honorable ministers, excellencies, ambassadors, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the panel that I moderated was more on international collaboration, and I think you can see on the slide the key takeaway points that were moderated at the Three Basins Summit. Now, we talked about how to leverage existing international frameworks. There was also a discussion on whether we need to create new frameworks. And I think there was relative consensus, pretty clear consensus, that existing frameworks need to be escalated, accelerated, and elevated. All three words almost mean the same thing, but they have different connotations. And in that respect, I'm very grateful to EY for having provided us with the technical assistance that we needed during these sessions so that we could collaborate in between the panels. Now, as you can see on the slide, the existing areas of cooperation between stakeholders in the three basins is already there. And it actually goes a little bit beyond the basins, because not all the countries in the three regions that surround the belts across the Capricorn axis, and the other one, that's the trick question. Not all of them are included in this, but they want to be part of it. So that would be one clear point for us to remember in moving forward. There are other countries who are just on the fringes of the basins, like West Africa. They are to the north of the Congo Basin. And it would just make the movement far stronger and far more effective in the international arena. We also talked about the guiding principles for a joint cooperation strategy. And again, I think what Madame Arlette has already articulated and what the other panel presenters have already articulated lies as the basis for our future cooperation. We then looked at developing a strategic axis around which actors and which stakeholders should be involved. I mean, we all believe in multi-stakeholder processes. And when we talk about securing financing, of course, we are talking about predictable and sustainable sources of funding from multiple sources of donors. We have to work rather hard at collaborating with our donor communities, of course. And the previous presenter, Monsieur Commissioner, you have already mentioned that we will talk about the donor funding in terms of not just the governance, but also where implementation and enforcement are concerned, which would be a joint and shared responsibility between all of us. Then we looked at the priority areas of work and the common roadmap. Training and capacity building is key. That is where organizations like the ITTO are a natural partner for all of you. We operate in all the three regions, and please utilize our expertise. We are on hand. We are there to support all of you because all of you are also member countries of the ITTO. So the next steps there is the need to change the narrative. The narrative is already changing. We can see that forests are now central to climate change and biodiversity. So Mr. David Cooper, the Executive Secretary of the CBD, already talked about the convergence, which was the output of panel 5. I think all 5 panels are cognizant of the need to also accelerate that process. The forests are responsible for both, for the biodiversity elements as well as the climate change elements in terms of mitigation, adaptation, reforestation, restoration, afforestation, and the list goes on. We would play all those functions. And the most important in terms of the narrative, which we discussed, of course, is also the socio-economic benefits. Environmental protection and conservation needs to be ensured, but also the economic and social benefits of sustainable forest management and the multifaceted advantages of forests needs to be escalated and elevated further. We will get there. The journey is getting very exciting for all of us right now. And again,
je voudrais féliciter Madame Arlette Soudan-Nono d'avoir initié ce mouvement et d'avoir été la moteur derrière les bassins depuis plus de 10 ans. Je vais conclure là et prendre des questions si vous en avez. Sans prendre de questions.
Thank you very much, Madame, for reminding people the central role that the forest plays in the protection, not only of the basin itself, but the global ecosystem, and to link the Congo Basin to the Upper Guinean forest. The interest that the role that our region is taking globally was really highlighted by the presence of the stakeholders that came and engaged to the summit. The third panel really talked about how we were going to discuss sovereign financial mechanisms in terms of carbon governance and trade. The rapporteur for that panel is not here with us today. He should have been the special envoy for climate from DRC, who has not been able to be with us today. But my dear colleague, Patrice Lefeu, Jack of all trade, will be the one reporting on this panel. Patrice.
I know. Thank you, Suzanne. Oui, donc peut-être.
So just a little word. It's not because we've been deserted by the reporter from the DRC, but there's an election at the moment. But this lady is the special envoy of the president, but she is also contending. She is campaigning at the moment for her own election, and we all support her. So I know that there's one word that's on everyone's lips here at COP28. We talk about carbon, but what is an action without financing? What is an ecosystem where the services that it provides are the financing that can pay for that ecosystem? These are the discussions that we had at Brazzaville, and there's a form of injustice here because there are lots of pledges, we all know, at every COP. There's a before and after. We talk about all the billions that are promised, but in actual fact, the countries, the developing countries, keep waiting for these funds and are still waiting. And that's where it goes. There's something wrong here. If we are on one single planet, we all breathe in the same air. So there must be a justice. Those who produce emissions, carbon emissions, should by definition provide a financial offset for those who absorb it. And this has not, unfortunately, not been implemented. So the discussions that we have is that what are the financing mechanisms that could encourage this financial justice, this and how we could try to implement these mechanisms so that the states who already provide a vital service to the planet are not forced to beg, and they are properly compensated for the services that they provide. It's a real change of mindset, a change of model. The industrial world depends on carbon sequestering countries. These are ecosystem services. That's my introduction, but don't worry, I won't be too lengthy. The summary is on everyone's lips, but we do need a strategy, and that's what I really want to develop here today. So, in the first elements that the first findings, but there's not only the carbon market, there's other financing mechanisms. There's also EDSWAP, for example, debt swap. We can swap a debt against credit carbons. It's a very simplistic way of doing it, or we can structure it. Discussions are ongoing. I took part in a meeting that was organized by the COP with the African Carbon Markets Initiative. And there is a will to move forward. And I think the three basins can move forward on this issue. We're not going to wait for them. We can forge ahead. For those who were at Libreville in Gabon last June, as you know, or in May, sorry, there was the Libreville summit, and there France proposed biodiversity credits. This means that when there is a commitment on biodiversity, this commitment needs to be remunerated. These biodiversity credits were discussed at Brazzaville. The minister really wanted us to do that. These credits are a sort of carbon premium. The forest is also there to preserve life and biodiversity. So if we have credit carbons for a forest that has a high value, we can also have a biodiversity credit that can reinforce that. There's also the carbon tax. Taxes aren't really very fashionable at the moment, but sometimes we need it. We need to orient the market. And it's an instrument that is open to states and also local authorities. When it's handled with some dexterity, it often puts pressure on business, on employment and economic growth. But when handled with dexterity, it can guide a market. And there's also the carbon market. What is the carbon market? At Brazzaville, and this was mentioned when the minister held a session in New York at the last general meeting, many people talk about the carbon market, don't really know much about it. So to simplify, we don't need to use complicated jargon just to feel scientifics. We can even complicated things can be explained simply. A market has three components. There is supply, people who will put something onto the market that is for sale, and that's carbon credits. And those are the countries that produce those carbon credits. And the three basins that represent 80% of biodiversity in the world, and practically all tropical forests. I'm talking here in the presence of an expert here. But these have a role of structuring the carbon supply. Who said yesterday? I was reading that in the conclusions of the COP minutes. It was Mr. Al Gore, the Vice President Al Gore, said, we're at the apogee of the creation of the biggest financial market in the world that humanity has ever known, with carbon credit. But everyone needs to bear in mind the zeros that a trillion or trillions mean. But it's coming, it's our way. Because, unfortunately, even when we reduce carbon emissions, we will never reach a net balance if the countries are not capable of reducing their emissions and to be offset for those who emit the most. I think there are representatives here who will not contradict me when they say that when industrial countries, even when they make the best efforts in the world, will never reach zero. Sorry, it's the representative of the IPCC. So, as I was saying, we have a supply market, and this is structured by the Paris Agreement. As the minister often reminds us, the voluntary market is completely deregulated. We want a market regulated by the Paris Agreement. 385 member countries signed up to it. There's also the demand market. We don't really know the extent of this demand, apart from regulated markets like the European market, EUTS, because businesses need to declare whether they are above or below a certain level. So we have to create this demand market. And for this, we need a certain jurisdiction. A geographic zone doesn't necessarily have to be in the same place. It can be the 3 Basins countries, for example, who need to agree on a system whereby carbon emitters need to reduce their emissions but also purchase carbon credits. This is what the Commission of the Climate Basin has agreed, and this is what we work on among the 3 basins. And I will conclude to say that there's also the financial markets, that money that banks handle for all individuals and companies worldwide. They're looking for investments. They're prepared to invest in carbon credits, as long as the system is solvable. Credit demand needs to absorb credit supply. You will see that we'll be able to generate incomes. The minister always reminds us about this. We've run the figures. I can cite Suriname, which will double its GDP by $5 billion and will reach $10 billion through carbon credit by 2030. And the Congo Basin will increase their GDP by 20 to 50% by 2030. It's not small things. This is a real economic revolution. I will also conclude with 3 points. What will make this work? We want this carbon market needs to be fair. Carbon credit income needs to be distributed to all stakeholders, and for that we need a governance. This carbon market must be based on transparency. If there's no transparency, and this is a key element of the Paris Agreement, if there's no trust, there will be suspicion. And confidence and trust are the major factors underpinning the market. So I think you really need to comply with the regulations, and for that we have the Paris Agreement. It's a huge project that's working ahead of us, and the next panel will be able to talk us about how we move forward. Thank you for this presentation, for listening to me.
Now I take my cap, moderator. Je reprends ma casquette de modérateur. Et je vais appeler...
So I'm going to ask for the representative of WRI, which is an NGO specialized in science and research. They have several thousands of researchers worldwide. It is a robust institution with their instruments. So I'd like to ask for Théodile Kinshoa. He is the scientific director of WRI, and he will talk about a major subject, which is scientific research, which is science.
Merci infiniment, Patrice.
Madam Minister, I'm delighted to be here. I am not Wanjira Mata, you know her, but on her behalf, I'd like to congratulate you on your leadership, and she would like to inform you of her friendship. So, I am in charge of strategy and commitment at WRI. I'm not necessarily the scientific director, but I do try to disseminate science to everyone. And I was in charge of moderating this panel, which was extremely important. That was headed by Mr. Booster of the UN and Madame, I'm sorry I didn't get her name. So this panel was on scientific cooperation and capacity building. And from the start, we asked ourselves the question, what is cooperation? What is the science? How do we roll it out through the three basins? So we started by recognizing that for scientists, cooperation is the normal way of doing things. Very few scientifics could claim that they don't cooperate. However, when you have to think about scientific cooperation in the three basins, we have to think of the strengths of each basin. We have to join forces between the three basins. And we realize that the Congo Basin is currently slightly behind the others. So we had to acknowledge this and say that we need to learn, and learn quickly, to learn from the Amazonian basin, Brazil especially, which about 25 years ago set up a major program which has contributed for 20 or so years that funded about 100 or so masters and PhDs on expertise in the area. So the question is how to make sure that in the Congo Basin we have experts who come from the Congo Basin, who are familiar with it, and who can bring their contribution to the table. So the second observation is worldwide. We already have scientific cooperation. There's the International Forum on Climate Cooperation is already a space, but we don't have a scientific space for the forest basins. So it's very important for us. We got the impression that in each basin there's already spaces for cooperation. In the Congo Basin, we have a few initiatives that we have cited here, but there are several of them. The CBSI, Congo Basin Science Initiative, and that are here to train future generations of researchers, which are there also to collate existing information. So building on what exists to reinforce cooperation between the three basins. And we also said that if you ask everyone here what science is, everyone will give a different opinion. But scientific cooperation needs to go beyond conventional research institutions, because the science can be implemented by everyone. So we want to ensure the inclusion of all the communities around us in scientific production. Scientific cooperation must not be restricted to conventional science, because we're all scientists. And intimately linked to all this, scientific cooperation must satisfy the requirements of all stakeholders, but private sector as well, and which has their own priorities. Finally, today there is a revolution, which is a geospatial revolution. There's three factors to it. Firstly, we have the capacity to create geospatial data at a capacity much higher than many years ago. All that we call there are a whole series of platforms who could do teledetection that we did not have 10 years ago. we also have AI, which allows us to rapidly analyze unimaginable volumes of data. And there's also the platforms where people can input their own observations, even in the community. So there's a real revolution in progress, and the scientific cooperation that we imagine must be built on this revolution in the field of geospatial science. So on the strength of all of this, in this panel, we proposed two elements, and one of these has been enshrined in the declaration. Science has a price, and we need to invest. We need to invest strategically. But we need to do this to produce data expertise, capacity in each basin, but also make sure that this science is open. It's not closed and restricted to laboratories. There's also, in this recommendation also includes the idea of setting up a cooperation laboratory between the three basins. This is fundamental. And the other recommendation was to actively involve all the stakeholders at all stages of scientific production, and also scientific cooperation to ensure that the science serves the interests of everyone, not even the people who are in this room. So I would like to thank you. And at the moment we're trying to think about how to implement our declaration, we hope that this investment and this cooperation for scientific collaboration, which will be inclusive, will be able to be put into practice. Thank you very much.
Merci, chers collègues, et d'avoir réussi à rendre ça.
Thank you, dear colleague, and you were really committed. It was really thrilling, and it was easy to understand. We know that science is something crucial for the Congo Basin. It's important that we are able to gather the scientific representative of the three basins and to receive the support from the international science community. So thank you. The Brazzaville Summit was an isolated one. It was a second edition of a summit and had had a schedule of events over the whole year, which started in December after the lively COP of Montreal, 30 by 30. We decided that the forest community would gather over the year of 2023. There was the one summit who happened in Libreville in Gabon in last February, and which serve as a preparatory phase for these three basin summit who happened in the Congo Republic and Brazzaville. The One Forest Summit, who had been organized by our brothers from Gabon, there we started to evoke innovative financing, but also the implementation of a more flexible and a swifter finance. Then we had agreed at COP15 with the creation of this CBD, the biodiversity fund. I won't quote the total funds gathered in this fund. It's not the place. So the Walton Foundation had publicly pledged to co-fund, which was the SID fund, International Conservation, in partnership with states and some philanthropists, which has fed this initiative, which had been launched in Libreville. Brazzaville has enabled us to deepen this conversation. But now I am inviting Mr. Herbert Lust, who is going to speak in Dutch, in French, in English, I don't know, but the three of them. on the seeds fund. If you allow me, I'm going to speak in English.
For the drive and the dynamism, and it's very impressive to see this. The seed fund that we created together with the Rob Walton Foundation, with the Moore Foundation, with the government of France, is really exactly, just as Suzanne pointed out, there to trigger innovative finance for nature. Because we have to remember, we're talking about energy transition at this COP all the time. But even if we make that energy transition successful, if we do not succeed in making the same transition for nature, then all of our efforts will come to no avail. 25% of our annual emissions come from nature, whether that's through deforestation, through agriculture, through and other means. So what we really need is rapid, direct financing to actually invest in technical capacity, financial support, and building overall capacity for that sort of protection of nature. So I'm very happy to announce that at this COP, the Government of France, the Rob Walton Foundation, the Moore Foundation and Conservation International put together a fund of 115 million euros, the seed fund that we've been talking about, to support that implementation. It's there to unlock more public and private funding for the nature that we care about and to attract new players that otherwise would not be able to invest in this. And there's a very good focus within that. It's the overlap between climate and biodiversity, what we at Conservation International call vital Earth. And there's a simple statistic there. If we protect 14% of the planet, we will actually succeed in protecting, at the same time, 75% of the carbon stored in nature that we cannot afford to lose. And at the same time, we will be protecting 91% of the vertebrate species, so of biodiversity. And at the same time, help millions of people, help them to protect the nature that they care and depend upon. So the seed fund has been launched. How will the seed fund work? It will directly invest in these landscapes, the ones that are covered by that vital Earth approach, and build the ambition of countries to do more and to attract more investment. So, as Suzanne pointed out, this has been in the making over several summits, and I'd like to thank the Minister again for her drive and activity. We will continue to build this fund, and we will continue to work with the countries in question to make sure that the fund invests directly and benefits those communities that require it immediately. Thank you very much.
Herbert, thank you so much.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Herbert, you are leaving, you are going. Mais, vous avez annoncé la création d'un site fond.
But you announced the launching of a seed fund. At the end of the session, we're going to introduce our project. So very soon, we're going to talk to you, Mrs. Minister. She did hear what you said, and there is a roundtable coming. So I'm ready for her. Okay. You won't sleep. You won't have a lot. We won't have time to sleep. We can a round of applause for him. So we're in a sequence that was not planned in the original session, because we have among us His Excellency Josué Lorca, who is a Minister of Eco-Socialism from Venezuela, who is honored, Mrs. Minister, to accept his invitation. He was not supposed to take the floor, but obviously he has some things to tell us. So I'm going to give him the floor. He's going to share some thoughts with us now. Your Excellency.
Buenas tardes.
Bon après-midi.
Agradecerle a nuestra ministra.
So I thank my Mrs. Minister from the Republic of Congo for this event, and to all who have already taken the floor on the perspective, to sum it up, of an activity that we have and reports on the conclusion of this three-basin summit in Brazzaville. For us, on the American continent. We are the countries where the Amazon region is located, which is much more than only biodiversity. It means culture, people's sovereignty and identity. And the call of the Republic of Congo means a call for unity to the peoples and a call of unity to save our planet. We are gathering 31 countries with 80% of the world biodiversity. We peoples looking for who have walked the same path as in resistance and towards our independence in each country. But today we are well aware of the need to unite our efforts to claim what belongs to us and to tell the rest of the world that from our peoples we can bring some solutions to the climate crisis. The Three Basins Summit is and will remain the opportunity to gather in trying to claim our just demands, but to suggest a new efficient economic management systems that they can benefit from to our peoples, and which also enables to protect biodiversity contained in those three basins. To protect the three basins means a sustainable development of the communities that reside in those three basins. Of the sustainable development by our local communities and indigenous peoples. I only want to thank once again Mrs. Minister for the opportunity to open that door that we hope with this roadmap can be follow next year to find a robust financial mechanisms towards concrete solutions for the protection of biodiversity, but as well for a just and sustainable development of our populations.
Biodiversité et surtout pour travailler pour le bien-être de nos communautés.
Merci.
Merci. Merci.
Excellencies, Mr. Minister, thank you for this words of incentive. You're already in the cooperation mindset, and I'm very pleased of this. Mrs. and Ministers, this is the end of the first section of the side event, which aimed at reporting what had happened in Brazzaville. I'm going the way to my colleague, which is going to introduce the second part of this session, of this side event. And I also thank the ad hoc interpreter, Mr. Coordinator, the climb of ECAS. We have so many things we accomplished and we achieved in Brazzaville. Thank you for our rapporteurs for their exhaustive report and a very good memory, because this summit has already happened a few months ago, but it reflects the richness of the debates we held over there.
This event, as my colleague just said, and we are going now to enter into a panel session. We have talked about what we aspired to: scientific collaboration, innovative finance, structure, the role of forests in terms of ecosystemic benefit to the earth, connections between the different basins. Let's talk about the how we're going to collaborate now. In the second panel, I will ask, sorry, I forgot my little accessory. On the second panel, I will ask to come and join us. So we only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seats. So we will have a hot seat. Thank you very much. I'm telling you, jack of all trades, it does it all. So to join us and keep company to Madame le Ministre, I will call Son Excellence Monsieur Clavier-Gatete, qui est le secrétaire exécutif de la Commission économique des Nations Unies pour l'Afrique.
Executive Secretary of the United Nations for Africa.
Touressi, who is the directrice régionale de l'Afrique de l'Ouest et du Centre pour IUCN.
Regional actor for UICN, which is hybrid, which is para-public and international organization at the same time.
Mr. Mauricio Blanco, to come and join us. I will call my sister colleague now from WWF, Madame Fran Price, to come and join us. Of course. J'appellerai notre coopérateur scientifique.
I'm going to call our science coordinator from Blue Right, Théodule, from WRI. Et le siège éjectable, et on dit en Afrique, c'est que le siège au milieu, c'est celui pour le plus jeune d'entre eux, pour le Benjamin. Et, of course,
You can sit, yes. And your dear friend. Et bien sûr, nous appellerons la ministre.
And of course, we're going to call Mrs. Minister Arlette Soudan-Nouo to come and join us and sit over there. So I need to fill this chair while this Mrs. Minister is not with us. Est-ce qu'on...
Let's two seats here. Monsieur Gatete.
Monsieur Gatete. On a Monsieur Gatete.
Non, Monsieur Gatete n'est pas là.
Monsieur Gatete n'est pas là.
Ok. Bon, Théodile, ta vie a changé. Tu as maintenant un vrai fauteuil.
You have been upgraded.
Viens. Promotion. C'est comme ça que ça se passe dans l'avion. Bon, Madame la ministre va se joindre à nous, mais en attendant qu'elle se joigne...
Mrs. Minister is going to join us, but until she doesn't, I'm going to remind you of why we're holding this summit. When we thought of the idea of the three basins, we were speaking of 80 countries around the world. From those 80 countries holding the burden, with the burden to be managing critical ecosystems for the survival of our planet. So we're asking both to the states and indigenous populations to play their role in what is for us vital. My colleague has mentioned it earlier, this idea of polluter payer and of compensated service provider, which requires cooperation. So cooperation is not easy when we have different cultures, when we speak different languages, when we are split by oceans, when we are oceans apart. But when you see the Far East peoples, they all look alike. There are some slight skin tone differences, but the center of gravity is very low because we need to stay close to the roots and the branches. So there is a knowledge on the environment which is
to none, et c'est aussi une connaissance des esprits.
and a knowledge of the spirits of the environment and of what all connects this environment and the creatures living in it.
Que puis-je dire?
So, without further ado, I'm going to ask the minister to join us. She's coming. She's on TV, that's why. No, she's just escorting her fellow minister. So I'm going to sit down and wait with you.
Applaudir.
Thank you, Giselle.
Écoute, mesdames, messieurs,
Ladies and gentlemen,
what I do believe that it's better for the minister and for you. L'un des objectifs
one of the objectives, as Suzanne was saying, is to look to the future. What are we going to do? We have been thinking together. We have formally outlined our plans together, and the heads of state have declared their wishes. Now we need to know how we implement. This is a very balanced panel because we have political representatives. We also have, as Susan was saying, rather hybrid people who are halfway between agencies and NGOs. We also have in the field representatives as well. So we're going to have different points of view, and that is what's going to be interesting in this discussion. Are we going to start perhaps? We're going to start perhaps with a vision of people working on the ground. They work in the 3 continents, people working on the ground. So there are programs in the 3 continents. So bringing these people together, developing joint actions seems quite natural to you. So I'd like to start with the WWF, not because you're on the right-hand side, but we'd like to know, you were in Brazzaville, you have this vision of the 3 basins. What are the top 3 actions in terms of operational cooperation, science, funding, etc.? What are the first actions that you would like to implement?
Ça marche, oui.
Is that working?
it works.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. My name is Fran Price. I am the Global Forests Lead at WWF, and it's an honor to be here with you today. Thanks to the Minister and Your Excellencies and all the leaders here. I would love to comment on what we think comes next, because this is an incredible start and continuation to a process that maybe started 12 years ago with the first summit, but it feels like this is a moment where there is so much political will and momentum and attention on our forests. And we need to collectively take advantage of this moment and build and strengthen the institutions that allow for inclusive governance. So that's one thing I would say is we really need to build those structures where, in particular, Indigenous peoples and local communities can have a seat at the table and ownership over the decision-making. I would say another thing that, and rights recognition and tenure recognition is at the heart of some of that. I'd also say that we need to strengthen our work on finance together. There's a huge finance gap. Others have spoken to this. And we need to build on the financial mechanisms that are working and scale them, like debt for nature swaps. We need more debt mechanisms in play that can really benefit governments and relate to their financial options. And we need to find new and innovative finance mechanisms together that can really think in new ways. I mean, the carbon market is one, but there are others. And we have actually done some work recently with COMIFAC and Climate Focus looking at those innovative finance mechanisms that we would be happy to share as a starting point for discussion. And I will say that we are very hopeful. Wonderful. No. So those are the two things that I would say is inclusive governance models and new and innovative finance mechanisms that we can build together. Those are my two big things that I hope we can work on together. And WWF is very committed to working with all the governments of the Congo Basin and the Amazon and Asia Pacific to move forward together. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Fran. Oh, this one doesn't work. Can we have one that works for... But she had her own, sorry. I've put my hand in your handbag. So thank you very much, Fran, for this intervention. And let's move from one basin to the other. We have here Mauricio, who's the Vice President for Brazil. And we've all heard at the beginning of this summit, the surprise announcement of a new funding facility, as you said, you know. En français, on dit l'argent, c'est le nerf de la guerre. And how something is really needed in order to bring the three basins together. Yes, it is the cooperation and the collaboration, but when you're talking about operationalization, then you need some funding, right? One of the outcomes of the discussion that we had in Brazzaville was the fact that we needed a facility. The question was still, suspended there. Do we get embedded within something that exists? Do we create something new that we call ours? Or do you think about some innovative mechanism, as was presented just before, such as the seed fund? One of the conclusions that the countries have come towards is the idea that a seed fund is nice, but will not generate enough resources. That being embedded within others, we've seen what the Global Biodiversity Fund is doing. So that may be the idea of creating a dedicated fund for the free basin would be the alternative. So President Lula made an announcement today. I know you're not talking for Brazil, I'm not putting you there. But coming from the perspective of the other basin and working in CI at that kind of in-between facilitation on the ground of the work, how do you see this being operationalized?
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Patrice, for inviting me for this panel. Mainly because we're talking about solutions. And when it comes to solutions to people, to climate, and to biodiversity, I personally like to be involved. So thanks a lot. Yeah. I greet Her Excellency, Minister of the Republic of Congo, and in behalf of the other authorities present here, thanks for inviting me also. So I'm trying to talk about what was recently announced by the governor of Brazil, what is being called the Tropical Forest Facility. We don't know if it's going to be a fund yet, but for now we're calling it a facility. As Suzanne mentioned, it's important for me to disclose that I'm not talking about from the government in behalf of the governor of Brazil. What I'm going to do here is to share with you a collection of information that we were able to put together and see what we can do. And it's important to say that it's an idea. I just met with the Minister Marina Silva today in the morning. I talked to her that I was talking to you. And it's important to be very clear that what is being put on the table right now is the beginning of it's a draft of something that has to be designed by the 80 countries that are part of this big effort. So this is pretty important. The proposal announced, it's pretty much straightforward to fund the conservation and the restoration for 80 countries. That pretty much establishes, it aims to fill this gap for large funding that goes beyond what is funded in carbon, in biodiversity, and other schemes of payment for environmental services. So it's based on area. So it's based on hectares. The simple part of paying for those for conservation and restoration, it's mainly the main principle of this mechanism. So the fund will be managed by a global organization that will raise funds issuing low-risk bonds. And at the beginning, the first funds will come from sovereignty funds from the countries that are going to be part of it, and will be complemented by private sector, mainly oil and gas, mining, and other resources from private sector. So that's important because sovereignty funds are not usually the funds that are used under UFCCC right now. So that's an alternative of new kind of funding to support conservation and restoration. So the main goal, as you know, is to support conservation, but strongly discourage deforestation. So an X amount of money will be paid for X amount of hectares, and if the countries do deforestation, they will be penalized with the less funding. So that's an important aspect of it. Again, the principles to be simple in the way of application. This is very important. Based on area, no carbon, no biodiversity, no environmental services, area, hectares, protected or restored. Another important aspect is the simple way of monitoring this. It could be a methodology that is already there, or it could be developed for this mechanism, but it has to be simple. That's pretty important. And of course, ensuring long-term and constant of funding. This is very, very important, the permanency of the funds. I forgot to mention that the fund, it needs to be inclusive in the way of disburse the fund, and I mean including indigenous people and local communities. This is super important. And the first goal that the government of Brazil is aiming for this fund is $250 billion fund. And the idea is to announce it at COP30 that will take place in Brazil in 2025. So this is pretty much the whole idea of the fund. And as Suzanne mentioned, it comes for complementing, and my colleague from WWF also mentioned that the idea is to complement the other funds that are there on place, but trying to be done in a very simple way of doing it. I know simple, it's hard. I don't think they are naive at that point. Simple is very hard, but that's the aim. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Mauricio. Je sais que Madame la Ministre a beaucoup de commentaires.
I think that
Thought. Because hold that thought. Otherwise, we might not be able to have some other discussion than the facility on this panel. But I would like really to ask IUCN in, I said it, he repeated it, in that hybrid role that you have. What does the weather tells? How is it perceived at the level of the countries? How is it perceived with the bilateral donors, by some of the cousin organizations like the UN agencies and more precisely UNEP, to see such cooperations happening with their blessing outside of their remit, but seeing a very active collaboration and cooperation between the 80, but also to talk about how we operationalize it. Please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the conversation. I would like to thank Madam Minister for the invite for this important discussion about how to operationalize whatever has emerged from the Three Basins Summit conversation also. Je vais m'exprimer en français parce qu'il y a pas.
I'm going to speak in English. There's no reason to speak in French. So I'd like to thank the Minister of the Environment, Sustainable Development and of the Congo Basin, and also is the technical coordinator of the Blue Fund, of the Commission of the Congo Basin. Because I think that in terms of the Congo Basin, we have to really look to the operational framework, and we must perhaps get away from the summit environment and think about how we're going to implement. I think you reminded us that there was a summit that took place 10 years ago. This is now the second summit, and lots of events have been held about the three basins that recall the importance of these basins, but I don't think that we're making much headway. And as an authority, you've asked me as an authority in conservation, when we see the damage that continues to be done to the forest and the climate change, and we see the various funds that are being created and the resources that are announced, but I think we really need to get down to the ground, get into the forest, and that's what I mean when I say operationalization. Madame la Ministre mentioned the proposals in her introductory speech to coordinate that were elaborated with the CCAAC to implement in the regional countries of the Congo Basin. We need to use these mechanisms to, over and above the announcements made, to effectively mobilize through innovative projects, that fundable projects, mature projects, and that these projects may be implemented in the field. This requires a certain number of things. This is why the UICN is committed to the Climate Commission of the Congo Basin to mobilize these resources and is leading this process with partners, working on mature projects that we can really put on the table and negotiate with our partners. When I say partners, I don't think that when we talk about innovative projects, I don't think we must be confined to conventional partnerships. I think the mechanisms today and the level of deterioration of our forests today require absolutely innovative financial mechanisms. It's not business as usual. Do we find other financial mechanisms, or do our traditional partners adapt their own known mechanisms? It's a bit of a mix. We really need to get away from the traditional mechanisms and also move towards the private sector, mobilize other sources of funding, including internal mobilization of resources. That's important. I'd rather talk about effective operationalization, have a roadmap to go towards this round table that has been announced in September, and to have projects that are mature enough to bring people around the table, and so that we can talk about the feasibility of the implementation of these initiatives that our communities are expecting and that our forests are waiting for. We also need to bring together experiences. Amazonia has its experience that is very advanced on the issues of forest damage, on climate change. It's very important that we create this relationship. The Three Basins Summit cannot stay at the state of summit. We really need to move on with joint experiences. The exchange of best practices will be essential. We need to create joint financing mechanisms together between the three basins. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Touressi, Regional Director with the UICN and focusing on implementation. Now it's Theodile and me and myself. We're on. In your report, when you were the rapporteur of your panel, you didn't delve into the details of how you're going to operationalize these scientific operations. So in order to say they're going to collaborate, we need to start with on evidence and evidence-based action, as we call it. So how do you ascertain that there will be an effective and actual scientific operation so that the basins don't remain equal? It's like the white papers written, the doctorates, the PhDs, and the peer reviews which are published every month. Can we guarantee that it goes beyond the paper phase? Thank you very much, Mrs. Mister, for this invitation. I'm going to answer to that question, but what you think about the implementation phase, you can envisage it, you can look out of two perspectives, the long side or the short side. And you spoke of the long side of the binocle. Why do we fund those declarations? We refine. I'm an anthropologist, and I am using the declaration on the three indigenous peoples. It is a declaration like the Brazzaville's one, but there was an actual effort to refine the wording of this declaration, and I think this is what we've already been doing here. So I would like once again to congratulate you, to commend you for this initiative, for this declaration. So I think that this declaration is one thing, but what is more important is the momentum. The declaration gives a frame, but the actual cooperation between the three basins, it's what you need to keep in mind. You need to. We mustn't stop here. We can talk about the wording, the content of the declaration, and nobody is going to dispute the need of cooperation between the three basins. I doubt it. I never saw someone putting it in question. So this is this long perspective, the long term, to think about governance, about financing, to guarantee that this cooperation will be real, and they will feed some international processes like the COP. And there is this shorter perspective, and it's the most interesting one. Thinking that this financing, we could receive it tomorrow or not. But while it is not coming, we can take some we can get this low-hanging fruits. There is a fruit that we could get our hands on easily. It's the whole knowledge that we have on our ecosystems, the set of tools. And I'm speaking as WRI representative at our NGO, but not only us, in the whole basin, we have science institutes who understand and follow those ecosystems. Within the Congo Basin, I'm going to quote only one example. We have the UFA, who performs a wonderful system on improving the understanding of ecosystem, and you've got GEOS too. So how we can share technologies between our basins on all fragile ecosystem like Dubien, peatlands. So concretely, we can share technologies and knowledge and scholar knowledge, and also practical science, practical knowledge from the everyday life. And this is very easy. It's not complex. Several organizations present today already do it. So we can share knowledge at the shortest term. And I'm coming back to that. We can do some monitoring and some follow-up work, but the longer the better. From the richness of science, we need to invest on the long term, and research needs to be carried by local researchers. We need to invest into local researchers. This is a second area where we can easily share knowledge, because Brazil has done it, Indonesia is doing it, and the Congo Basin also is doing it. So this is a second area where we can invest for the future. In the Congo Basin, we have the CBSI, Congo-Based Science Initiative, which is a place where you can capitalize on, and you try to improve the investment for the sake of future generations. So these are two short-term areas for science cooperation. So the follow-up of ecosystem, which is really easy to do, and second, the investing in the youth, in this science for youth. Thank you very much, Théodule. Mrs. Minister, now I am giving you the floor, but let me quote you several hats, and I'm going to read them out in order not to forget anything. So, Minister of the Environment and of the Sustainable Development of the Congo Basin, a coordinator of CCBC, representing the Summit of the Three Basins, and of course, coordinator for the management of the Blue Fund. You've heard everything that has been said before you. WWF, she spoke about this cooperation, which needs to be inclusive and should not lose sight of the indigenous people's right, and that this integration is doing inclusively. You heard our Brazilian colleague, Mauricio Blanco, who spoke about Brazilian ambition, telling that he's emphasizing that he's not the official representative of Brazil, but he's heard a lot of things in the corridors. And we've heard how we should invest in science for the youth, so that we can have a perennial flow of investment. And I will take your word for it. You said be sure that our summit goes beyond the summit. So with all those words, ideas, and the several hats you have the word. For starters, thank you to you all once again for being here and for accepting our invitation, which is a feedback of what happened before and which sums up what's at stake, what was at stake at the Brazzaville summit. It was a very meaningful occasion for the planet. We are at COP28 to discuss about the fragility of our ecosystems. The forest ecosystems which bear our climate's biodiversity and the dire situation of our planet. The general public is questions, but there is an interrogation mark that remains, and how not to take into account the solutions brought forward by the three basins who carry the implementation phase. How, all along COP28, how come that couldn't we support more the ones who bring in themselves the solution for all these problems on the ground? Humankind is really complex. We want everything and the contrary. We are here, we are debating, we're looking for answers while some solutions are already ready, and we take we spend billions and billions to wage wars, to kill, to impoverish, and we are not able to mobilize finance for stabilizing the degradation of our planet, and we shout every day, climate change, climate change. There is a sentence which could define myself. Who are you wanting to, do you want to fool? Since we don't have a planet B. You see, it's my fifth COP as a national authority of I'm the boss of the climate and biodiversity, and I'm wondering, COP after COP, and then the same discussions. It's small talk. It's only inside events. The same political discourses, tons of paper, but nothing concrete. Very different solutions are brought on the table. Issues are piling up. A series of issues that which are well known. Nothing new under the sun. It's another phrasing. We come up with new concepts. We don't achieve. We don't take on pledges, and the list is really long. So here I am asking myself whether we should we need to waste so much money, because I paid for my plane ticket, which is expensive, and accommodation here is not easy. I've got my staff. The same for heads of state. We pollute a lot by coming here. We spend a lot. For which outcome? For announcements are going to be made. So there is a complete opacity in the management of those funds. The governance is really not transparent, and it doesn't seem to be a problem for no one. So I'm really wondering, what do we want? Because nobody here is discovering the planet's problems today. A planet which is suffering and is almost extinct because we are greedy for exploration of our own natural resources, and we come here to give some lessons to the one who are preserving nature. I'm part of the solution of the Congo Basin. He is the solution of the Amazon region. He's part of it. It's well known. The Congo Basin, to mention only this one, because I'm a incumbent minister, but this 1.5 billion of carbon sequestration in our forests, 31 billion of tons for peatland. And when the scientists go on researching, because there are some other peatland that hasn't been accounted for. So I'm not even quoting the carbon from biodiversity, carbon from the hydric resources. Brazzaville does have some solutions, which has been listed. The states have some investment plans. The Congo Basin has a climate commission with a financing plan, 10 billion. So needs have been identified. You've got a multilateral development bank which hosts those funds and manages them, which turns those projects bankable. Why don't we invest in projects which are the solution for the balance? Since the Congo Basin, as IPCC reminds us, is 3 to 4 years of greenhouse gas emissions. Africa only represents 4% of the greenhouse gas emissions. This is also publicly known. So Africa is not degrading the environment. Africa remains the solution. So I'm wondering. Maybe I'm not understanding anything. I'm asking. I'm wondering why should I look for answers which have already solutions, which are public. But since we are responsible states with, for some of them, responsible partners, and some of our decision makers, like the people in charge for the three basins, were going to go on being resilient, tenacious, and to repeat the same things, because people prefer to stay deaf and mute to what we are saying while we're speaking the obvious. But we are laughing ourselves. If the planet vanishes, it is the humankind who's going to, the living are going to disappear. The planet itself will renew itself without us. That's why I won't take much longer. I will only say that the Congo Basin, it has been recalled by regional director Nana Touressi. For September, we are heading to a donor roundtable. It's an occasion for luck and sharing the possibility to make it up, to maintain this green lung, which is intact, not because we don't want to develop, but because we remain responsible. We are still responsible. We want to go towards sustainable whole development. We have populations who see SDG 3 recalls it, how to fund the eradication of poverty of populations, SDG 3. The solutions are 17 SDG goals, so bearing all the evils of the planet. So, but we need to fund for it. So that's why we want action, and this action, I think the Conference of Parties don't give a solution. They only announce things, they only launch things. There is no transparency in the management of those funds announced by the Global North. There is no transparency. They ask the Global South all the time to justify themselves, but before looking in the straw in the eye of the Global South, you need to see the beam in the Global North's eyes. That's the problem today.
I'm not known to have a forked tongue. Too much is at stake. it's the whole population of our country. It's an emergency. We are victims of flooding. We are victims of the deterioration of the climate by the countries of the north that makes an impact on the southern countries. And Brazzaville had already scheduled the raising of concrete financing, but we need more time to find more mature mechanisms with responsible donors. That is why we're going to wait for September to go to this round table of donors, to which I invite all states to join forces with us so that we can really raise these funds, that can really have some concrete action. The proposal by by President Lula, you reminded us of it here, Suzanne. We're fed up with announcements, but we are starting to get used to it. I reminded you of Copenhagen in 2009, perhaps Glasgow, 1.5 billion for the Congo Basin. I am the coordinator of the Congo Basin. I work with the COMIFAC, with the CICOS, and I challenge you to say which organization has received one single penny from this organization. That is why I talk that these are just words in the wind. For 6.5 years, I have been to many COPs, and I am completely responsible for my words. I know that President Sassou Nguesso sent me to speak with Lula, and I salute the leadership of President Lula, who has managed to stabilize deforestation in his country. President Sassou went to the Belém summit. I was part of this delegation alongside the Amazonian Treaty Organization, alongside the countries of the Amazon. We were in the middle of the lung of the Amazon in Belém, in the Para state. We were part of this will of the states 14 years later to organize a summit like the one that established the Belém Treaty. As my friend here announced, we need discussions for this. Why? We don't simply we need to exchange best practices. We don't want to duplicate. In Southeast Asia, for example, I'm talking with the executive secretary of ASEAN, who is preparing texts at the moment on climate issues. We're currently talking about them within the implementation of the roadmap. Countries of Southeast Asia and the Mekong rivers, which is an institution with other countries like China that you will find who are also alongside the Mekong, which, like the Amazon and the Congo, makes up our three basins. Because here these three rivers hold all the balance, all the water balance. You no longer have to talk about the Amazon. You no longer have to talk about the majestic Congo or the Mekong. We know they have so many fishing possibilities, for example, so many things to say. We come back to the communities, the indigenous populations. We have heard the will of Brazil to organize a forum on the Three Basins Summit. We expect bilateral exchanges to understand what this proposed fund will actually contain. Because we know there's an Amazon fund, but we have our Blue Fund, our Congo Basin Blue Fund, for which we'll raise funds for the 16 countries plus Morocco. And in Asia, they also have different mechanisms. So we respect the sovereignty of each country. So we're waiting. We're waiting to be invited to consultation. For the time being, there are no discussions. Things have been announced in the media. We have not yet been invited to an official exchange, so I can't really tell you much more. On the diplomatic level, on the bilateral cooperation level, you need to be officially contacted. You need to have access to what your partner is proposing before you can talk about it. I would also like to salute the presence of a partner here who is the current coordinator of the Climate Commission of the Sahel region, who is here. Please, I'd ask him to applaud him because he does some incredible work. It's the sister commission of the Sahel region, and it promotes the Great Green Wall initiative. We are 3 commissions. We have the Congo Basin Climate Commission, which is presided by the President of the Congo. There's also the Island State Commission that is presided by the President of Seychelles, and also the Sahel, which is presented by the Presidency of Niger. So we also had a summit chaired by the King of Morocco. We had a summit on the co-emergence of Africa, which saw the initiation of these African commissions, which is an emergence of the African Union, because Africa is beginning to organize. It's the only Africa which has a continental organization which brings together all its countries. Africa is rising. We all have the LESCAF, which you know of, which will promote our economy with a notion of sustainability. The ideas are there, the structures are there. It is just the northern powerful countries that need to make a real commitment, a sincere one, that we want to respect their southern partners. That's where it hurts, quite honestly, because we are mirrors. We are, how do I say it? We are Chinese. We are silhouettes. And yeah, realpolitik is fine, but climate emergency is going to bring the reality to, and we invite you to join forces with us on concrete actions, to encourage funding in these roundtables presided by the IUSN, and we will have other partners. I cited the work, the World Bank, the UNPD, and others. We hope to join forces to obtain this real solution. It's really, I really am talking with great sincerity and a painful heart, because today we cannot cheat. We don't have 2 planets, and it's our fate to work together to find a solution.
Merci.
Thank you very much. Please applaud Madame la Ministre.
Madame la Ministre,
I have said that when the chief talks, we are all silent. You're not part of the basin, you aren't. So I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask the Sahel just a short word who can bring us back home before Patrice sums up. Thank you, Madame the Minister of the Environment.
Thank you again, Mrs. Minister of the Environment, of Sustainable Development of the Congo Basin. As they say in Africa, when the the cacique, the tribal chief, has spoken. No one takes the floor after him or her. But for the Congo Basin, it is important to note that the efforts deployed by the Republic of Congo in terms of preservation and protection of the Congo Basin forests in the Sahel, in the fight against desertification, we only have to support it. Thank you.
Monsieur le haut représentant de la Commission de...
Mr. Representative of the Sahel Commission, thank you for your words, for your kind words. I come back to what Mrs. Minister said. We all know your passion, your commitment, and everybody is grateful for that. And to what level the system which has been implemented with the Climate Commission, the Three Basins Summit, Mrs. Minister, we know how much they rely on you and the momentum you've created. So we need to applaud you because it's really commendable. We could organize a Q&A session. Unfortunately, we still have a lot of projects to introduce. So we're going to stop this second segment. We had the pleasure to thank the panelists, Mr. Mauricio, Mrs. Regional Director Touressi, Mrs. Representative of WWF, Mr. Théodile, representative of the WRI. Well, there will be a follow-up.
Pardon, nous allons démarrer maintenant la troisième round de cette session et nous allons parler projet. Pas de souci, pas de souci. Pour parler projet, je vais appeler Madame Raja Shafil, elle est la directrice du 4C.
Raja Shafil, she's the director of 4C. Morocco's competency center. As you know, Morocco is a paramount center.
Très bien, mais c'est comme ça, monsieur. Madame Shafil, je vous appelle peut-être ici. Ciao, bonjour. S'il vous plaît, par respect pour le prochain intervenant, je vais appeler Madame Raja Shafil.
Out of respect for the next speaker, I'm going to Mrs. Raja Shafil for.
Je n'ai pas eu d'ordinateur, je ne sais pas comment je vais faire. Je vais faire vite. Alors, je n'ai même pas le son, donc je ne peux pas présenter. Donc, ceux qui continuent la réunion.
So those who go on with the meeting, could you please take your seats so that I can make my introduction, my presentation, please. Then we have the help of all protocols observed. I'm very happy to have the honor to be invited by Mrs. Minister Soudan Nuo to introduce the 15 cards and projects and to ease their presentation to the donors. So I thank Mrs. Minister and the Climate Commission of the Congo Basin and the 4C Center of Morocco, who has supported CCBC since its foundation, and with the two other climate commissions in Africa. And we had the pre-study of the Congo and the pipeline project. So we have prorogated this project with a technical and financial support in the form of 15 cards, priority cards for the so we have streamlined the initial project. So I'm not coming back on all the criteria, but among them,
Florentine, parmi les critères de sélection des projets, donc il y a plusieurs.
Could you raise your hand, the ones who are listening to interpretation into English, please? Could you raise your hand if you are listening to interpretation into English? Personne?
Avec les objectifs de la CCBC, un impact sur.
Align with the CCBC's goals and with socially relevant, and with the fact that these projects enable to promote innovation and technology with a potential of sustainable, very strong potential of sustainable development. Among those projects, sorry, I forgot to change slides.
Alors, parmi ces projets, bien entendu, donc on a étudié quels étaient, avec l'appui du PNUD.
So, with the support of the offices in the Congo and the UNDP, we looked at the projects that had a component that could be financed by the private sector. So, or to which they could contribute. These are listed here on the screen. They are projects 1 to 8, even up to 13. There are 13 out of 15 projects that are potentially open to funding by the private sector. And there are only 2 projects among these. It is mainly the public sector that will be involved, and these are the mobilization and capacity building of civil society organizations and community leaders in the Congo Basin for sustainable management of wetlands, and also the rehabilitation of the hydrological follow-up of the Congo Basin, and this involves several countries. So the methodology that we use, we have used general benchmarking used on the SDG investor platform of the UNDP. So we have various investment possibilities of SDGs. So you can look this up in the platform. With the UNDP, we have looked for similar projects to see if there were any similar projects already funded by the private sector. So the 13 projects that are oriented by the private sector are as follows. I'm not going to go into detail. The titles give an idea of what they're all about. So the first one is support to indigenous peoples and local communities for the protection and conservation of forests and biodiversity in the Comifac area in Central Africa. As you can see, each time we have underneath the title, you have all the flags representing the countries that are involved. Lots of projects in this list of 15 projects. Many of them are multi-countries. So project number 2, we have the water supply and sanitation in the Lake Victoria Basin. So this involves several countries. We have Burundi, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, and Tanzania. So we have some projects that only involve one country, and this is the improvement of access to drinking water and sanitation in the area of Gombe Matadi, and this concerns the DRC. Another one, only involving the DRC, is support to improve the farming production, protection and conservation of biodiversity by the local communities in the province of Kivu. And we have project number 5, which involves the Central African Republic. Number 5, promotion of small hydropower plants to supply mini networks to ensure better access to energy in Central African Republic. There's project number 6 regarding Equatorial Guinea, which is to improve access to energy to the benefit of restricted populations between Boko and another place. We have another project, number 7, concerning Rwanda, rehabilitation of the basins of Kivu. We also have Chad, project number 8, support of the fishing and fish farming sectors. Project number 9 in the Congo. It is a farming forestry by small farmers and small operators, private operators. Project number 10, it's a multi-country project that involves the introduction of a sustainable system for production. Project number 11, Burundi. It is the treatment of solid municipal waste in Bujumbura to produce electricity. Project number 12 for the Congo, which is to reinforce cocoa value chains. Number 13 is a support for regional integrated development project at Lake Tanganyika, and it involves several countries: Burundi, DRC, Tanzania, and Zambia. So these projects tend to be mainly destined to be financed by the public sector. So we have number 14, which regards mobilization and capacity building of civil society organizations, community leaders in the Congo Basin for sustainable management of wetlands. So this involves the Cameroon, Congo, Cape Gabon, Equatorial Guinea, Central African Republic, and Chad. And finally, the project number 15, which consists in rehabilitating the hydropower monitoring system in the Congo Basin, involving Angola, Cameroon, Central African Republic, Congo, DRC, and Gabon. And that's it for my presentation. Thank you very much.
Cher Adja, merci infiniment pour ce travail. Je sais que tu as besoin de courir, là maintenant. Donc merci d'être resté jusqu'à la fin de ce long exercice. Bon retour, bon voyage. Merci infiniment. Mesdames, Messieurs, il me revient maintenant de vous remercier à nouveau pour votre patience, parce que ça a démarré tout ça il y a 3 heures maintenant, il y a plus de 3 heures. Donc tout ça a été assez long, c'est assez unusual, comme on dit. Mais en tout cas, vous avez vu, il y a eu différentes séquences et c'était important qu'on puisse les aborder. D'abord comprendre ce qui s'était passé à Brazzaville, se projeter dans le futur et puis ensuite avoir des projets concrets qui vont alimenter la mise en œuvre de cette collaboration. Merci encore à vous, merci à ma collègue Suzanne qui a fait un travail remarquable, qui est venue se pluguer sur quelque chose et qui a pris les choses en main. Et merci à tous ceux qui ont aidé, la technique et puis mes équipes qui sont pas loin derrière pour pouvoir mobiliser cette audience. Merci à tout le monde et puis on retourne à la COP maintenant. Merci.